Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Beer Enthusiast. This is episode 25, and we are talking about a wonderful brewery. We are talking about Hofbräu, and we are going to be looking at their Dunkel. I'm sure many of you have heard of the brewery. It's one of those beers that it seems like any grocery store, specialty grocery store, anything that carries beer, it seems like they've got Hofbräu something, whether it's their original or their Weiss beer or their Dunkel, just really great, delicious beer that's easy to get.
Yeah, and for us, they added Hofbräu Dunkel to the BJCP commercial examples in the more recent update. And so that the fact that it's so widely available, it makes it a really easy
Right,
beer to study for our purposes. But if you have like
right.
a local Dunkel, that's really awesome too. I feel confident speaking for Scott that this is one of our favorite styles, so we're
Oh yeah.
um,
Hmm.
really excited to dive in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go
What'd
for it.
you pick for glassware? I just got my kind of these are in 11.2, 330 milliliter bottles, so I kind of got my smaller Willie
Oh,
Becker.
nice.
I have a big
Yeah, I
like
have a Willie Becker too, but I've got the Brave Noise one. It's little. It's got a lot of screen printing on it, so it's going to be a little. I'll try to describe the beer really well. But I was wearing my
yeah.
Brave Noise sweatshirt, so I
Oh yeah,
figured
yeah. You gotta
let's
do
just
that.
complete the package.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's required. Absolutely required. Um, let's run through the recipe a little bit. Hofbräu had a lot of really good information on their website. Beer clocks in at 5.5%. They're going to have that dialed in. That's probably not going to be changing from batch to batch anytime soon. 23 IBUs for hops. They have Hercules and Pearl. Assuming Hercules is a bittering addition, and maybe Pearl's kind of a little bit later of a hop addition. For malt, they say light barley malt, Munich malt, and caramel malt. And for a style like this is going to be where a lot of the kind of noticeable variation is going to be. Maybe there's some different German hops that are used for bittering, or maybe for just a touch of flavor or aroma. But this is really where there's going to be. You can have a combination like this. You can do 100% Munich. You can throw some Vienna in there. All different kinds of ways that you can, and of course that doesn't even touch on what supplier you're getting it from. Not all Munich malt is of the necessarily of the same barley variety. So there's lots of choices and ways that a brewer can make, even though what would seem like small changes can have big impacts on their finished beer. Obviously, lager yeast, and then they do say that they use a decoction mash, and we've talked about that on the channel before. Taking a thicker portion of the mash and then heating it up, and eventually boiling it to create color, flavor, some positive things, kind of in the downstream part of the brewing process, like filtration and things like that, making it a little bit easier to do that. But really, no surprises here when it comes to recipe.
Yeah, I think the only thing that is maybe even slightly out of the ordinary is the admission of caramel malt,
Hmm.
which is not necessary to make Dunkel, but a lot of it's interesting to see such a big German brewery do it because I think a lot of American breweries that are approximating Dunkel and some of the malt shift character that you get in some Dunkels when we get them a little bit old, it comes across as a little bit caramelly, right, or melanoided
Hmm.
even. And I like Hofbräu's just like, yeah, we stick it in there, add a little bit of malt complexity. Who cares? This is great.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on with that. All right, let's dive into sensory here. This is uh, a very clear beer. There's no doubt about that. It's kind of got this like, what are we gonna say for color here? It's
It's
kind of,
brown, but it's got a very bright burgundy kind of
yeah.
saturation to it.
Yeah, at the edges. Yeah, if you kind of try and look through the center, it seems a little darker, but if you kind of hold it up to the light at the edges, you're right. It kind of gets into this like ruby, burgundy, garnet, kind of however
Yeah.
one sees that and interprets that. I mean, this has still got pretty good retention. It's like a light tan head.
Yep.
I just put my nose in, and speaking of, malt shift, I feel like we've got a little bit of that going on, but man, is just like really dark. I would even just say pumpernickel bread.
Pumpernickel from the jump, right? If you've just
Yeah,
ever
just
had
huge.
pumpernickel by itself, it can be aggressive, but the aroma is definitely there. That bread that's just so savory and so rich. That's just jumping. That's the dominant aroma note by far to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is starting to shift into a little bit of like a cherry note. I get a little bit of like an apple note too, but I also think that could potentially be from Munich malt. In our experience when we've done malt steeping, we found that malt notes can provide some fruity notes from time to time. Again, depending on on how it's produced and the variety, and um, getting a little bit of that here too. But you're right, this is really just as it should be, just kind of a showcase of these kind of darker malts.
Yeah, and there's some other bread complexity underneath there. There's a little bit of bran muffin.
Mm,
There's a little bit of just like regular wheat toast kind of
yeah,
character. Not quite as dark and rye heavy as pumpernickel, but all of that's there. It's like a really complex piece of bread. You think bread tastes or smells like one thing, and you take a whiff of this, and it's like, no, it can smell like multiple things.
yeah, absolutely. On the palate,
Mm,
wow.
that's so good. Yep, some of that pumpernickel comes through again. Um, we've talked a lot about we've been drinking a lot of Doppelbock lately. So I got to throw
Hmm.
that out there. And Dunkel's like your session Doppelbock, but we in some examples of Doppelbock, whether it's some of the malt shift character, some of the age, or whatever, there's this kind of savory edge to it, and this has a
Right.
little bit of that, right? It's got like something with
Absolutely.
the very, very light herbaceous hop character is combining with that really deep, rich bread note to be this is like a savory beer almost in that sense. It's not as you had trace amounts of some kind of like fruity malt shift character, and the palate is not very fruity to me at all.
No, I agree. That kind of goes out the window, and yeah, getting lots of really dried bread character, toasted bread character, pumpernickel. Kind of in that 7 grain. Always this kind of
Yeah,
thing always reminds me of like out here we get Ezekiel bread. Is a specific brand of bread that we get that's kind of like a really popular kind of like in the like Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, kind of like specialty grocery stores. It's kind of in the one of those breads that they keep in the frozen aisle. Weirdly enough,
yeah, yeah. Um, Interesting thing about Dunkel and this one in particular is, people describe light lagers as beer that tastes like beer, and to me, Dunkel lager is beer that tastes like beer. It just
yeah,
reminds you of like if you've ever sampled little kernels of malt, um, or done malt sensory of any kind. It's like what if you could describe what the essence of malt flavor is to somebody. I think you would start with Dunkel, and you would just say, this is beer flavored beer to me. So that's
yeah,
not a great descriptor, but it I wonder where the the descriptor started going toward low character, pale, like American lagers, that beer that tastes like beer, which is really just beer that tastes like nothing in a lot of instances.
yeah.
And this is this. Let's make a new movement to this is the beer that tastes like beer.
Yeah, because really malt is, as many have said, malt is the soul of beer, and so there should be kind of these like, these beer flavored beers of different spectrums that, feature these malty characteristics of progressively darker, and different flavor profiles of different kinds of malt. So I'm down with that.
Where would you put the body and the finish on this? It's very
Mm.
interesting for 5.5%. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I would say even with all of the sweet impression, even on the mid palate, it still starts to feel like it's not going to be overtly sweet. Sometimes there's a little
Hmm.
bit of like it looks like it's going to be sweet, and then it kind of comes down to something a little drier. But this is pretty upfront. I can tell it's gonna be pretty dry, and it ends up being dry. It doesn't feel overtly sweet at all. Body, I would say, is probably medium. I would say I don't think this is in the medium full category for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Medium, and it's a very pleasant 5.5 that kind of it almost feels like the definition of 5.5. You know, you've got some characters that are hinting at a richer body, but when you're done drinking the beer, it's still pretty refreshing. Almost like a birch soda or something that's got some darker and spicier characteristics, but is just really, not too heavy at the end of the day. There's that very common misconception that all dark beers are heavier than pale beers, and it's like, well, your average American pale ale is 5.5 or a little bit heavier. So it really just depends on what else is going on with the beer. This is a pretty light and refreshing dark beer, even though you're getting all these pangs of different characters that remind you of something heavier and richer. But at the end of the sip, it's not heavy and rich.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you go to a German specialty store here and you buy packs of rye bread, I mean, they give you the slices that you get for rye bread are like small because like you can't just like eat a ton of rye, or of pumpernickel. I mean, they're so small. But I really feel like the hop character kind of comes through at the end. I think that subtle spice that you're talking about, it's starting to get really bright. It's starting to border on like a really dried, like almost mint, kind of character. But it's not really. But it's really just adding to a perception of a drier finish. So still balanced towards the malt, still pretty, still sort of pretty, smooth in that regard, still slightly, towards the malt, but really not, I would gather that if we did the nose plug and really just kind of isolated our tastes, we wouldn't be thinking, oh my gosh, this has a ton of residual sugar in it.
Yeah, no, I think that it has a tiny, tiny bit. I just did that. I held my nose internally while taking a sip, and it's kind of like it finishes nice and dry. It's not bone dry by any means. And then there's almost just at the very, very end, and I think a lot of Germans describe their lagers this way, especially Helles and Dunkel, that it's sweet finishing. And you kind of have to adjust the language expectation, right? Because they don't mean that it's cloying or that it's like a dessert beer. They mean in the balance of your typical beer, it's sweet finishing. Right. But it is barely off dry, probably.
Yeah, I agree. So we've clearly got some strong characteristics to work with for food pairing. Again, we're studying for the Master Cicerone exam, so we would be remiss to not mention something in kind of the cheese realm. I think I was kind of trying to look into this, and I think this really could kind of fall into when you're kind of looking for kind of perceptions of things like nuttiness and things of that nature, you're kind of going to be just making your way towards Alpine cheeses, these kind of in the semi-firm, cow's milk cheese. Looked up a particular cheese called Beaufort. Tasting notes were toasted hazelnut, warm cream, and then a floral marigold kind of character. So again, adding to any, I'm thinking anything that can sort of bring any sort of herbaceousness, hop character, florality is going to be a welcome sight in a German style. Those are all characteristics that would be reminiscent of German hops, so they would not be out of place. Of course, toasted hazelnut, giving that impression and being a good match with all of the Maillard Browning character that we're seeing in this, and all the different, all the bread character, and then you can't have warm cream without something to put it on. So why not?
No,
why
that's
not some toast. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about, we've already said this has kind of a pumpernickel character, and if you have common breads or common sandwiches that are on like a rye bread, either pumpernickel or like a swirled rye bread, are um, uh, oh, I'm totally blanking the name of it. What's the name of the sandwich that's pastrami and sauerkraut and
Oh, yeah,
um,
yeah, Reuben.
Reuben? Thank you. And a lot of versions of Reuben will have a slice of Swiss cheese, right? So it's kind of like
Hmm.
a little bit lower intensity Alpine style cheese, but you're bringing in a little bit of tang, a lot of nuttiness, and I think that type of cheese fits really well here, like you said.
Yeah.
An Alpine cheese that's not too old or too intense, because I think you'll reveal that this beer is not all that intense if you get a cheese with a ton of character to it. Um, but yeah, that's a lot of times we're trying to pair some of the fruity character of beer with lighter cheeses and stuff like that, and we're kind of robbed of that opportunity here. So let's take that
Mm,
nuttiness angle. I think is really really smart.
yeah. And that kind of led me to my savory dish, and it was also kind of inspired by a breakfast I had this morning that I hadn't had in a while. Just regular, just scrambled eggs and toast. And then
Mm.
I thought, what about doing it? Maybe something a little more exciting than scrambling some eggs would be doing kind of like a quiche preparation. What can we add to that to kind of match some of the Maillard character that you get from this? I think there's lots of different, options there, but I'm going to go with something like caramelized onion. And then, what's a quiche without some cheese? Let's just stick to, let's just stick with the Swiss realm. I think Buford is kind of if you're putting Alpine cheeses on a scale of 1 to 10, it's maybe in the like 4 range. And I kind of want to dial
Nice.
that back a little bit now that we've got a couple of other intense things in there. Especially, we've got caramelized onions, we've got this baked, these baked eggs that are probably going to get a little bit more of a browning on them than you maybe normally would, doing a scrambled egg preparation. So, maybe just dialing it back to something a little less intense, maybe like a 2 on the Alpine cheese scale with just some Emmentaler. Just really, really light
Ooh.
nuttiness, and then just taking that one real part of it, and then when you heat it up, it just dials that up a little bit, and really just makes that a noticeable thing. So you've got two really good bridges with those things. You've got sweet and savory, because even though the eggs are going to get some of their own browning, they're still going to have a ton of that sort of natural savory character that they've got. And then this has plenty of carbonation to cleanse any of that. Another easy preparation. One of the great things about quiche is that you can just, if it's too intense, it's easy to take away, and if it's not enough, then it's just then it gets fun because you can add just about anything you want. It's just a very very good canvas.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you could serve my suggestion with your suggestion. On we're on the same wavelength without mentioning identical recipes, but I wanted to do potato pancakes.
Oh my god! I
Um,
almost put that as a side. I almost said you could do a side of
yeah,
potato pancakes. Oh my god! When you said
yeah.
that, I was like, I think he's gonna say potato pancakes.
We
Oh,
definitely link
funny.
up in the breakfast train
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
frequently, but yeah, you could make. I mean, just kind of that base like starchiness is going to be a really nice canvas. Hopefully, you could make those potato pancakes either way, right? The two most popular ways to make them are you basically shred potatoes, mix in some egg. You're kind of making like latkes almost, and you fry them up. But if you want to angle it more German, you serve them with sour cream or applesauce. I think either of those would actually be really nice
Hmm.
here because sour cream is kind of like a low intensity, tangy character that would brighten a lot of the things that are going on. But that like savory pumpernickel kind of caramelized note in the bread is just like the world's best sounding compliment with that fried character of potato. I think that's just going to be super yummy. And the other way you can make them, I've seen people really dig. I've never made them this way. I got to try it at some point. But make potato pancakes with leftover mashed potatoes. So it's a smooth. It's not. It's less like a hash brown and more like a
Right.
pancake, but
Hmm.
savory. And you can dress it the same way. You can use applesauce. You can use sour cream. Both would be similar, but you'd get more of the griddle like you get on a pancake in that
Yeah.
sense, rather than like a fried hash brown. And you could dress with some chives or whatever for a little, just a little bit of bright allium character that I think could be a sneaky good complement to try to draw out some of the hop character a little bit too. But yeah, potato pancakes, and we're just going to serve it alongside your quiche.
Yeah, that sounds great. What did you come up with for? I got to go first on with the cheese and the savory. What did you get for dessert?
Yeah, dessert. I wanted to go. I was thinking through a lot of caramel things, and some caramel things would be too sweet for this beer, but I want to draw out more of that caramel malt. So I think the way to dial it back a little bit is instead of chocolate chip cookie, we're doing caramel chip cookie. And Trader Joe's has salted caramel chips, or you could
Mm.
just add some sea salt to and kind of get that salted caramel vibe going. And just, we've talked about this in other episodes with German style beers, but like the reason that salted pretzels are like so good with a variety of German beer is that salt is just a flavor enhancer on so many levels, and so salted caramel works with the same property. But the way I wanted to do the chips instead of like caramel ribbons or a full caramel, just because I think that may be too sweet by the time that kind of like dense caramel dissolves in your mouth and you get that kind of contrast between super sweet and off dry. It might still be pretty good. I don't know, especially if you um, had a smaller portion. But if you just had a lightly sweet cookie, you make it like you're making a chocolate chip cookie, but just substitute caramel chips, and then a little bit of finished with a little bit of salt as well. And that way you're getting kind of that doughy, also griddled. We're kind of like leaking up on that little griddle bottom of the baked cookie with little bits of that softer and not sticky caramel flavor, almost like a little butterscotch chip. Um, so you don't have caramel sticking to your teeth. You just have caramel flavor. So that's my idea.
Yeah, mine had a little has a little thread of caramel into it. Have you ever heard of this? It's a Filipino dessert called I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, but Turon, Turon. Have you ever had lumpia?
I've had lumpia.
It's dessert lumpia.
All
I
right,
think lumpia is like absolute
I'm
crack.
in.
It's so good. And it's like, yeah, they're like, oh, it's a dessert lumpia, and they're like, and it has bananas inside, and you still fry it, and then you can put caramel over it, and then I guess traditionally there's also strips of jackfruit on top. I can't say that I've had jackfruit, but whenever I've mentioned that to people, they're kind of like, oh, jackfruit's kind of like a weird thing. Like
Oh,
it's kind of this weird kind of cross in textures between like pineapple and an apple and a mango. But if you cook it a lot, then it gets savory. I was reading online. Some people think it even has like it reminds them of just like having pulled pork, which was just
yeah.
really
You
weird.
can you can shred if you cook jackfruit. You can shred it like you would a pulled pork. So
Oh,
I
I
think it's
see.
more reminiscent of the texture if you made it with
So
if you made it with some
texturally,
sauce, you wanted to make like pulled pork tacos or something.
yeah.
Texturally, it's very close. Jackfruit by itself doesn't have all that much flavor, so that's kind of cool actually to um, combine it with something else. So you're drawing out a lot of stuff.
Well, and it's that savory note was really what I was trying when I was reading into this. I thought, oh, well, if it really does have this reminiscence of, pulled pork, and obviously it's not going to, even if it's reminiscent of it, it's not going to be nearly the same. Kind of playing
Yeah,
on that, kind of background savory note, playing off of sweet and savory. Obviously, you're frying something, so you're going to have a ton of matching there with all of the Maillard browning characteristics. Obviously, a base like this with banana is going to be again kind of reminiscent of like a Dunkel's Weiss beer. And then like I agree with you. Then you're just trying to play with how much caramel are you going to have on top of that, and how sweet is it going to be, and how's that going to play together. But I think it could be. I think you're right. I think it could actually be. I think it could be pretty good.
oh man, and just the the texture and kind of size and density of a lumpia dough is not like or wrapper is not like super duper heavy, right? You'll get a little bit of crispy, you'll get some of that, lightly sweet, almost like caramelized in the oven or in the fryer.
Right.
Um, that sounds really nice. I like that a lot.
Yeah, because I would say the wrapper there, it's probably not like probably not as thick and crunchy as kind of like maybe your egg roll, like your traditional kind of egg roll, but not as thin
Mm.
as like like phyllo dough or something where you've just got to have like layer upon layer.
Right.
But kind of somewhere in the middle where I think you're right, where it's still got this really kind of flaky texture to it, but it's not brittle by any means. It's not just going to fall apart in the fryer, and the stuff's not just going to leak out into the fryer. But yeah,
Yeah.
this
But
is even though like I think one thing we've shown here, even though this maybe seems like it's a showcase of just one thing. We've given, I think, some really good examples of lots of different ways you can play off of this beer. Lots of good ways to complement, some fun ways to contrast, and outside of German cuisine too. Obviously, a lot of people are going to want to lean toward sausages or things of that nature, but you can do a lot more with this style.
yeah, and this is just ringing true to what we've tried to do in previous episodes, which is maybe mention a couple of traditional pairings, but we're trying to think outside the box a little bit without,
Right.
without suggesting something that is too risky that is probably not going to work or whatever it may be. And so this is one of the beers that falls right into that kind of, it's a little darker than amber, obviously, but that you have all the Maillard character in the world to deal with complementing a wide variety of things. And so even though it's a simple beer in a lot of respects, um, that means you can play around with the dishes that you want to pair it with, as long as you don't go too intense and draw out all kinds of different things.
Absolutely.
I like the banana though. I think the banana is a good call.
For next week, we've got one that's nice work. Next week we've got a kind of a very interesting beer. We're going to do Firestone Walker Double Barrel Ale. Very very interesting kind of take on a beer. Just kind of in general, it's a very unique beer. Doesn't really fall into any particular style. Kind of super well, but lots of interesting stuff to talk about, and should be a fun beer to pair with. Hopefully, Firestone Walker's got pretty good distribution, so hopefully you can find that. And if not, what would you suggest somebody tries to find if they can't really find that particular beer, since it's such a kind of specialty of theirs?
Yeah, I would grab a strong bitter, particularly if you
Yeah.
can get Robinson's Trooper. Is right about the same alcohol strength and kind of about as similar of a style. Or if you have a local brewery that calls something an English pale ale,
Yeah.
really DBA is kind of a English pale ale slash strong bitter, by UK standards. So yeah, a British pale ale,
Yeah.
British style pale ale of any kind, I think would be great.
No, I totally agree. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks to everybody for supporting us. It's good to be back on track and getting some more recordings out, and getting the new year off to a good start here. And we will see you next week. So drink more
Cheers,
Session
friends.
Doppelbock. Cheers.
Hey.